This material explores the intersection of modern political conspiracy theories and theology, specifically debunking claims from commentators around Israel's influence on American politics and Thomas Massie's primary defeat. Let's dive right into how we can elevate this piece, because there are some really interesting tonal choices.
Yeah, it's a highly researched authoritative submission, but we do need to look at how the reader experiences it.
Exact. So, a key theme running through this material seems to be the juxtaposition between mocking political commentary and, well, deep spiritual reflection. And I have to ask, when we move from calling internet theories insane right into a profound discussion about the Jewish people being a light to the nations, I mean, does it feel like a movie abruptly shifting from a political satire to a serious religious documentary, potentially losing the audience in the process?
It really does. The extreme tonal shift between sarcastic political takedowns and profound theological arguments creates a disjointed experience for the audience.
Yeah, it's like rhetorical whiplash.
Right, because if you look at the weakness here, the piece begins by aggressively mocking figures like Candace Owens and Russell Brand. It's calling their theories patently ridiculous and insane.
Leaning super hard into that internet sarcasm.
Exactly. Treating them like clowns in a circus. But then, almost without warning, it violently pivots to a highly earnest theological explanation about the Jewish people being the light to the nations.
Which is a huge jump.
It is. This abrupt transition from internet sarcasm to deep spiritual theory undermines the gravity of the latter point, and it just gives the listener that whiplash you mentioned.
Because, as a reader, you're putting on your cynical armor for the first half.
Yes.
You're laughing along, keeping an emotional distance.
Precisely.
So the suggestion here is to unify the tone. You can either elevate the political critique to match the intellectual weight of the theological argument, or you can introduce the theological framing much earlier as a subtle guiding thread rather than a sudden destination.
Okay, so how do they actually do that in practice? Do they have to lose all the biting commentary?
Not at all. As a concrete example, one way to do this is to introduce the everything is theology concept at the very beginning as a thesis statement.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so you analyze the conspiracy theories about Brigitte Macron and Charlie Kirk through that calm, analytical lens rather than resorting to name-calling.
So instead of saying, these people are crazy, you say, to understand this political absurdity, we have to look at ancient theology.
Exactly. You elevate the whole piece right from the start. Alternatively, the author could maintain a strictly investigative, journalistic tone when debunking the claims, saving the theological documentary promo for a distinct, cleanly separated postscript.
Just completely separating the two movements, basically.
Right, rather than blending it directly into the political commentary. Treat them as two distinct parts of the same essay.
That makes a lot of sense. So moving from how the argument sounds to how the core evidence is handled, let's look closely at the section discussing the $31 million spent in the Thomas Massie race. By brushing off this massive financial figure, does it leave a gaping hole in the argument that opponents can easily exploit?
It absolutely does. The defense regarding campaign finance misses a crucial opportunity to comprehensively dismantle a core piece of the opposition's evidence.
Yeah, because Megyn Kelly makes a huge point about that record-breaking spending, right?
She does. When confronting her point about the $31 million spent in the primary, including the $20 million from pro-Israel groups, the material basically waves it away by stating, that's just the way American politics works.
Which, is technically true, but
it's not a strong defense. By dismissing this massive financial figure as mere standard practice, the piece inadvertently leaves the opponent's strongest argument regarding undue financial influence completely intact and under-addressed.
Right. Because if you're the audience and you hear $31 million, your pattern recognition kicks in. If the author just shrugs it off, it looks like they don't have an answer.
Exactly. It breeds suspicion. So the suggestion here is to strengthen the counter-argument by directly engaging with why that specific amount was spent and how it naturally aligns with broader political strategies.
Transforming a weakness into a strength.
Yes, transforming it into a demonstration of the incumbent's widespread unpopularity. You don't have to ignore the number, you own it.
Okay, but how do they connect those dots without turning it into a boring spreadsheet of campaign finance?
Well, the raw material is actually already in the text. Instead of dismissing the money as a concrete example, the author could explicitly connect the financial backing to the long list of Massie's contrarian votes mentioned later in the piece.
Oh, right, like voting against COVID relief.
Yeah, voting against COVID relief, the budget resolution, and the North Korea sanctions demonstrate that the funding to oust him came from a broad coalition of interests reacting to his consistent obstructionism, not just a single-issue operation.
That's brilliant. Because then you're saying, look, when you make enemies out of everyone who wanted the budget passed or North Korea sanctions, you're going to face unprecedented opposition.
Precisely. And another option is to highlight how Trump's own foreign policy agenda aligned with these financial backers.
Oh, that's true. The author does mention Trump wanting Massie out.
Right, so you make this bending a convergence of mutual political goals rather than an isolated conspiracy. When Trump's goals overlap with pro-Israel groups' goals, the funding naturally skyrockets. It demystifies the money completely.
You're just shining a huge fluorescent light on it instead of leaving it in the shadows. I love that.
It makes the argument practically bulletproof.
It really does. So let's shift gears to the literal delivery of the script, specifically how the author feeds information to the audience. I can see what you're going for here. Let's see how we can strengthen this when we get to the external social media quote. I mean, is reciting Adam Fishberger's satirical Inception timeline verbatim akin to explaining a joke? Like, is it slowing down the pacing of an otherwise urgent critique?
It is. Relying heavily on verbatim readings of lengthy satirical social media graphics disrupts the narrative momentum and dilutes the author's own voice.
Yeah, because it feels like you're just reading tweets out loud at a dinner party.
Exactly. The weakness in that section is that reading point by point through the confession of an Israeli operative timeline severely bogs down the pacing. By relying on an external author's sarcasm to do the heavy lifting, the material loses its sharp, authoritative edge.
It just gets entirely lost in the weeds of internet meta-commentary.
Right. When you read a graphic visually on your phone, you control the pace. But translating a text-based meme into a linear audio script or long-form essay destroys that visual pacing.
Because you're forcing the reader to go at the speed of speech. And hearing, "We inceptioned him to do this" over and over just stops being funny.
Yeah, the joke dies. So the suggestion is to synthesize the core point of the satire into a sharp, original summary or rhetorical question. You need to keep the focus entirely on the absurdity of the claims without sacrificing the piece's forward momentum.
So how do you synthesize a 5-point meme without making it sound super dry?
Well, for a concrete example, the author could condense the entire graphic into one sharp sentence.
Okay, like what?
Something like, conspiracy theorists want you to believe that foreign operatives spent years meticulously grooming a libertarian MIT engineer to vote no on completely unrelated domestic issues like COVID relief, just to derail the Republican agenda.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that packs all the punch of the original joke but takes 5 seconds instead of a minute.
Exactly. Or, alternatively, they could extract just the single most absurd point from the graphic, like the idea of inceptioning Massie to fly back during a pandemic to vote on a continuing resolution.
And just dump the rest of the list?
Yeah. Use that isolated example to swiftly dismantle the entire conspiracy theory before moving on. Practice aggressive curation. Show the masterpiece. Don't show every pencil sketch.
That's a great analogy. It centers the author's voice again and keeps them as the expert guide leading us through the noise.
Exactly. You maintain your authority and you keep the road clear of debris.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful. So just to recap the main points of our critique today, we focused on standardizing the tone between the political and theological sections, directly neutralizing the campaign finance arguments rather than dismissing them, and synthesizing those lengthy external quotes to maintain narrative momentum.
Right. And just to summarize the actionable suggestions for the author, introduce that theological thesis earlier, connect the $31 million spend directly to Massie's broader contrarian voting record, and summarize satirical tweets rather than reading them verbatim.
Perfect. Thank you so much for lending your deep expertise today. It really highlights how we can elevate already strong writing. And to our listener, thank you for submitting your work. We'd love to invite you to submit your revised work back in for another critique once you've had a chance to play with these ideas. Thanks again, and keep pushing your work to the next level.